Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, since we all got excited about Bob Myers, some new reporting indicates it might be a little more messy than we first thought, plus the latest on the rest of the front office. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back in to Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Monday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button. Do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your personal Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to learn more. All right, a lot to get to around this Suns front office rumor mill. Joining me as always from the wonderful West Valley, my fellow Suns credentialed media member. How are we feeling on this Sunday evening, Ben Garcia?
I'm feeling good. It's kind of funny, man. We got three insiders, all three that we can trust. Friendly, firing, shooting from the hip, not necessarily at each other, but with different stories and perspectives. And I'm not so sure who to believe, but we'll dive into it all in just a second here.
Yeah, let's just start with the big news of last week that we got some follow-up on, which was the potential interest of Bob Myers, former Golden State Warriors lead executive turned ESPN analyst, who, depending on who you ask, is either in line for this job to run the Suns front office or not interested, or maybe somewhere in between. And I think that's a little different than what you and I maybe thought when we talked about it on Friday's episode, Ben, because as you mentioned, we've got the Mark Stein report that we discussed saying that the Suns are very interested, but it might be a long shot that it happens. Gerald Bourguet over at PHNX adding a little bit there that there is mutual interest, but I think the details might be what's holding it back from happening, how the job would actually look. And then you have John Gambadoro, who is just straight up putting the kibosh on the entire thing. How have your views on this possibility changed since we talked about it last week, Ben?
Yeah, so since I've been in the Valley my entire life, and I've grown up listening to, when it was Gambo and Ash and now Burns and Gambo, there's just some people you tend to lean on more when it comes to information around Arizona. And I'm really, before I was 50-50, yeah, this is starting to sound like an actual thing because Mark Stein had reported it, and we were just hearing it from reputable people. Now that Gambo's kind of putting the axe in it all, and then you and I both forgot to mention, I think it was the Denver Nuggets that have a general manager opening, it's starting to feel like the Suns might be getting played a little bit. And it's nothing against Dwayne Braken's reporting. It's nothing against Gerald Bourguet's reporting. They both do a really good job. I would never go after either of those two guys. I just see someone who I think is the most dialed in, kind of putting an axe in it all, and then you texting me like, hey, maybe he's using the Suns as leverage, and we forgot to mention the Denver Nuggets job is available. I'm not axing it all because there's still other people saying yes, but I'm highly skeptical, and my belief that it could happen kind of takes a big hit. What about you? What did you think when you saw all these, not necessarily conflicting stories, like 4 guys v1, and that being Gambo?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's so in opposition as it might seem. So I went back while you were talking, and I was trying to find the exact wording of what Gambo said, and it was a post from the PHNX account referencing that Stein report, which just simply said, the tweet said, the Phoenix Suns have strong interest in Bob Myers, according to Mark Stein. Gambo said, no, not true. So it's like, I don't necessarily feel like he's saying it's impossible that he gets hired here. It almost could be that he's just trying to push the brakes on that it's this all-out blitz. I think the thing that I'm curious about, because yes, like the details we've kind of heard at least of why maybe the Myers thing isn't such a home run, mostly from Gerald, were that it was, it might not be Myers' preference to like live here and actually really be involved in the minutia day to day. And that just doesn't really seem like anything that would work, And of course, money and all that. And so you hear that, you kind of hear the vague reporting on both sides, even from Gambo. And it makes me wonder, like, do you think they've actually even talked? Because that would be a different type of story, right? And I almost feel like that could be the explanation for this whole thing is it's all just sort of hearsay, and Ishbia has never actually spoken with Myers or his representatives yet.
I would say they've definitely been in contact. To what degree? Probably in a much more earlier stage. But I think the Suns, like, just to play off your point of like, Gambo's not completely axing it. Maybe he's just saying it's not as much of a fit as maybe you and I both thought it could be. And maybe the Suns are kind of doing the thing that you and I talked about the other day, where it's like, well, with this news coming out, if it's not Bob Myers, it's going to be a major disappointment. So maybe the Suns are posturing now through Gambo and saying, hey, just maybe tone the brakes down for us just a little bit, that maybe we want the guy, but it's going to be more obstacles than we're willing to at least put out there for right now. So maybe it is just that. Maybe Gambo is just like, well, there's not strong interest from both sides, or there's not completely overwhelming interest from Ishbia, because maybe for the reasons that we list out in the last episode. But there's that idea too. I
almost feel like it's like how aggressively they're pursuing him. I mean, interest is like, what does that even mean, right? But that's why I'm saying it might have something to do with like, have they actually spoken? Have they met? Have they talked details? Or is it in such a, generalized, we would like the idea. And in that case, it's like, well, duh, who wouldn't, right? And so I almost think we might just be so early in all of this that some of the reporting was just getting a little bit ahead of itself, and Gambo's almost just saying, like, let's let it play out.
How early are we getting on this, though, Brendon? It's been almost 2 weeks, so like about firmly a week and a half since that press conference. Like, have there been any conversations about like, hey, what are we doing at this point? That's why when you say like
no one else has made a hire, then I don't. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I would guess, based on how vague all of this is, again, that they haven't. But I also, I get what you're saying, like just counting off the days, but it's not like other teams have really. I mean, the Kings and the Pelicans did, but they didn't even interview people. They just went with established veteran front office people with Dumars and Perry, guys who have been doing this job for legit decades. And so it would worry me more, or I would be more like urgent about it if guys were flying off of the market left and right. But we haven't even had a single team be eliminated, or I guess Memphis, right? But until that was yesterday, like we hadn't even had anyone eliminated from the playoffs. We haven't had a whole process play out from these teams with openings. Until that happens, I don't really care if they talk to Bob Myers. I mean, as long as they still put themselves in a position to hire him, I'm not really too worried about how the timeline works. But I do think we should talk about the Denver side of it. Do you think that, because I look at the Denver cap sheet, and they have a Jamal Murray contract that is more total money than Bradley Beal is owed. They have, a pretty grotesque Michael Porter Jr. deal. They have probably more pick flexibility than the Suns, because everybody does, but not by much. They have their 2031 pick, and the Suns don't. Other than that, they've swapped and dealt away almost everything else. There's some protections.
Jokic isn't young. He's not young anymore.
Yeah, I think the Jokic is the single most desirable part of it, so I'm not going to put him on the list of cons of the job. He's 29 and the best player on earth. But he's better than Booker too, right? So like, but
Yeah.
other than Jokic, I don't exactly see a lot of things that make that job desirable. So it would also kind of surprise me to that this would just be fully like some kind of negotiating ploy just to get like $1 million or $2 million more from the Nuggets. Like, is that such an awesome job to take that you're going to play games in public and make kind of a mess of it, of everything? I don't know if I fully could see that side of it either.
Yeah, well, when you had mentioned, like, is he potentially just like using the Suns? I'm so prone to believe that an Arizona team is just being used by someone else. And I go back to the Peyton Manning days or the LaMarcus Aldridge days with the Phoenix Suns where, you kind of thought you were going to get him and he ends up with the Spurs. So I'm prone to just to believe probably, but I do go back to the same thing you're saying of like, how much desirable is anyone else? My question would more so be, how much desire does Bob Myers have getting back into basketball? Because the openings for right now, they're not great. And so you and I have also talked about this, though. Like, the Lakers aren't firing Rob Pelinka, but Rockets, like, they're not firing their guy. Like, it would have to be someone losing their spot as the general manager from a team that's got way more flexibility and more of a desire to be there in the playoffs. Maybe he's waiting on that. I don't know. But my question more so be like, does he even really want to get back in? And that was the thing where I was like, if that's the case, then I don't even want him here. But that's just different.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, we would have to hear a lot more specifics of the negotiations on this, a little bit more in the mold of what Gerald had said about his kind of living situation and the exact kind of hierarchy of the pecking order of the front office, which we'll get to in just a second. But yeah, I just don't see a team that's obviously going to have a vacancy that can pay him top dollar and at least has some tools, whether that's, money, willingness to spend, whether that's a great franchise young player. I don't know what team that's going to be. And so, yes, Denver is probably at least comparable to the Suns in terms of, the what you're kind of taking ownership of when you do get the job. But I still would say that you're probably mostly fighting against him just staying with his ESPN role and this advisory stuff he's done in a couple different situations now. Let's get to James Jones and Josh Bartelstein, the latest details when it comes to those two's future with the Suns. Next. First, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. The basketball and hockey playoffs are in full swing, and there's no better time to turn your sports knowledge into real cash than with Prize Picks, the top destination for daily fantasy action. Prize Picks makes it simple. Just pick more or less on at least two players' projections, and you're in. Just like that. You can even mix and match players across basketball and hockey, even baseball and more, for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. That's right. It can be easy. The point is the reason you're getting so much money is that you're stacking it up, right? So you can take the obvious, right? You can take stuff that would have huge plus odds in a real straight up bet. But you can say, hey, Nikola Jokic more on points. That's been a good bet this playoffs. Hey, I'm going to go with Luka Doncic more on points. And maybe I'll say Connor McDavid more on goals or points for him. You could pick the superstars, but you still win big money because they all have to hit. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling here as we sift through the latest in the Suns rumor mill. I wanted to draw some attention to two pieces of news from Gerald Bourguet's latest article on PHNX, but we'll start with James Jones because he, of course, currently has the job that Bob Myers potentially could take. So, Gerald wrote on Friday, the Suns' first order of business will be turning their attention to the front office and likely revamping it. Now, I want to mention something I didn't say in that last segment because we did mention Gerald then too. His prediction in this article was that the Suns ultimately do not hire Bob Myers, just to say that's kind of the state of things right now. But he went on to continue writing, whether James Jones is the right fit there remains to be seen per multiple sources. More than likely, the Suns would either let Jones walk when his contract expires in June, which we knew already, or keep him on in an advisory role to consult with whatever new lead executive they hire. That feels like the most concrete sign of a real demotion for Jones that we've heard. More than what was said at the press conference, more than even the speculation around Bob Myers or whatever. That's like advisor. That's hardly even a real full-time role. That's almost like if you can find a better job, you might as well take it, but we'll give you $100K a year just to, do right by you if we really have to. But for all intents and purposes, like, he's out the door, it seems like.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. They're just trying not to humiliate him because he didn't humiliate the Suns. Like, the Suns were competitive for a long time. He didn't do anything. Like, he wasn't out doing the, getting in trouble with the law. He just is no longer a fit. It was time to move on. He will not take an advisory role with the Suns. God, how embarrassing would that be for him? Where he has to get demoted, give up his job, and then go to a advisory role, which is like just not what James Jones would do. I think he would take a year off
to be
or
fair,
get plugged in somewhere
didn't
else.
you tell me he would? You don't think he's going to have a lot of other places to land? We were kind of going back and forth.
No, I don't think so.
Well, so he's just going to say no to money?
I mean, come on, man. It's like you had said, it's $100K a year. I understand at least at some point you are kind of playing. Well, whatever it is. Like, how much is your dignity worth? And I feel like going into an advisory role and getting demoted, I wouldn't do that. But I'm speaking from me, though. If I had all that money, I don't know him. Yeah, of course. If James Jones did that, I'm not saying it would. I would say it would be kind of embarrassing. It would be kind of embarrassing.
It would be, but I also think there's a lot of times when you see stuff like that in sports where those guys, like, they don't even, it's kind of up to whoever the new hire is, how much they even want to actually involve that person. So it's almost like, sometimes it ends up looking like free money. Like, you're an advisor. You get like nice seats in the arena, you get a paycheck, and then in a year we say goodbye anyway. Like, I don't know. It doesn't really matter if he takes that or not, because we're in agreement that this, for all intents and purposes, seems to be the first clear indication that he's not going to be involved in making decisions about the future of this roster.
So you were confident in what you're saying is James Jones will not be here, just from the reporting from Gerald. But at this point, like, before you were kind of hesitant because we haven't heard names and we haven't heard any real idea. And maybe, again, that's the Bob Myers thing. Maybe just kind of going back where the Suns being like, hey, man, we haven't even fired Jones yet. Like, give us time. We don't want to do wrong by him.
Maybe, but or I really hate to do this, but I think it's worth mentioning. I think that it's fascinating to me that we are hearing this patient approach at the press conference and in some of the reporting that we've talked about on the show. Yet, where are these leaks coming from? Why does anyone have a say about what James Jones is going to do here if everything is on hold until somebody gets hired? Both things cannot be true. And I just, again, feel like if I have to speculate where anything being talked about through the media when it comes to the future of certain people, the only person locked into place is the owner. This feels like it's more of a thought bubble from Matt Ishbia that's floating into the media, and we're hearing about it, and I don't like that, because that's the exact opposite of what we've been talking about.
Well, it goes back to, I hate to go back to the Bob Myers, and we already talked about that, but it's the same thing with the James Jones thing. The one thing that I was going to ask, and I forgot to in the last segment, was where is this coming from? Like, who are they talking to? And if it's Matt Ishbia, which I don't think it is, I think it's just loose lips sink ships type of thing where people can't keep their mouths shut, because it doesn't look good when they already have someone and they can let him go right now. I still don't understand why they haven't already. Even if they're going to hire a new boss, that new boss is going to decide if James Jones is going to be here or not. Like, if I'm Jones, why would I even want to stay in that role and wait for someone else to tell me to get out of here who just showed up? None of it makes a lot. Like, if we're being honest, man, none of this makes a lot of sense.
Do you want to know another thing that doesn't make sense? While we've been sitting here, I received the latest email from Mark Stein, and I'm just going to throw a wrench in everything. You ready? We'll do this in a minute because we didn't have time to prep, and it adds to not making any sense. But here's what he wrote just now. Interesting rumble out of the desert as we await the Suns' expected restructuring of their front office. Word is that James Jones, whose contract as the Suns' lead decision-maker expires in June, has to this point been operating as the point guard for the Phoenix coaching search. So do you want to just end the podcast and just put a
I
big
don't even know what
question
to say.
mark up?
I
Put
don't
a
even know what to
graphic
say.
on the YouTube
I'm
feed
not-
that's just a question mark and say goodnight. Like, what are we even doing
I'm not
here?
even I don't like I'm not trying to add to the theatrical and entertainment value that this podcast does bring. I don't even know what to say to that. Like I really don't know what to say, because it then it gets away. Like if Gerald's reporting is true, and I have no reason to believe that Gerald wasn't told that,
Mhm.
and Mark Stein, two guys who work basically at the same company, is being
Sorta,
told
yeah,
something
but
different.
Different sources, of course. Stein's been
Different
doing it
sources,
forever.
but the same
Yeah.
company. Like, I mean, I'm sure they talk about where they get these things. Maybe not. Maybe I'm making that up. And
Yeah,
that's
I
totally
don't think
possible.
so, because
That's
this
totally
is in Mark
possible.
Stein's newsletter. He does his own separate stuff, so I
That's
think
fair.
it could very well be a little bit. I mean, that is true of this time of year. Like, we should just say, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be that everything is. We have to talk about everything because we do a daily podcast and we want to try to get as close to the truth. But I mean, stuff gets thrown around. People hear even the sources that tell these reporters things. They may not even be fibbing or exaggerating. They
No.
literally could have heard it from somebody, and that, like, it gets so many layers deep at a certain point that it's hard to tell exactly where each thing comes from and what each little kernel of truth might be. But it's not great to hear so much different stuff.
Well, that's where you and I come from. We don't think anyone is just lying. We think they were all told this. I don't believe that all these guys are just telling lies. Rankin, Bourget, Gambo, Stein. I think they were all told this. But again, it leads you to believe that. Does the front office know what even they're doing? Like, are they having conversations every day and it's changing? Like, have they even met? Have they had conversations of what it's going to look like? Does James Jones know what his role is going to be? Nothing makes sense. And if James Jones doesn't know what his role is going to be, why is he doing the point guard search? Like, that's the biggest question. Why is he doing the point guard search if he doesn't know his role?
The head coach search. Yeah, well, let's get to Josh
The head
Bartelstein,
coach
which
search,
is the other ingredient here. Gerald had a detail there. And then I do want to maybe tie a bow on this with circling back to Bob Myers, because that may be what everything is contingent upon next. All right, and we're back. We are closing out the show. Let's talk about the last final piece of info that Gerald Bourget did report on Friday at gophnx.com, where he wrote, Ben, as for Josh Bartelstein, one source assured PHNX Sports that he will remain as CEO. However, if Jones is no longer the Suns' general manager and a new GM is brought in to be the main decision maker, that would likely require less input from Bartelstein on the basketball side than he was contributing with James Jones in that position. There is so much to parse in the wording of that. I don't fully even know what to make of it, if I'm being honest with you, Ben, because it almost, like, there's a way to read that that's a little disrespectful to Jones, where it's like, because he's the GM, Ishbia somehow thought like he needed a little more help, but then a different guy like doesn't need that same amount of help. It's very odd, but I would say that if this is the mindset of Ishbia right now, this makes it even more important that he hires somebody who he does trust, like Myers or someone similar, because that continues to seem like the number one pathway to just stability and cohesion in this organization.
Why in the world was Bartlestein making these decisions anyways? Like, I understand that maybe Ishbia trusts him, but clearly he wasn't doing a good enough job.
There's actually one thing I kind of do want to clarify on that, because
Go for it.
we do like to dig his grave a lot, fan base and us and everything else.
Yeah, I love doing it personally. I love doing it.
Yeah, and fair enough. He's earned it, and the connection with his dad has proven to be disastrous when it comes to the Bradley Beal trade and everything else. But he was an assistant general manager in Detroit. Like, we should just state that. He was in the basketball operations department as an assistant GM with the Pistons. It's not as if this dude cut his teeth doing, like grunt work in with like the legal staff, printing out papers, and then all of a sudden he's making the trade call for Kevin Durant. Like, he was involved, just to say that. But it's still, it just must be that Ishbia never trusted James. But then why didn't he fire him sooner?
Why didn't he just let him go at the end of the year?
No sense.
Because
I don't even mean that. I mean like the February 2023 when he bought the freaking team instead of giving him this like supervisor guy in the form of Bartlestein that clearly just was like this weird intermediary guy. It's like, why didn't we have this whole entire conversation when Ishbia first took over? Why did he even keep Jones in the first place if he never fully bought in? I just don't get that.
Well, you're not going to get an answer for me when it comes to that. I don't understand that part either. My thing is just like, we've all written the eulogy on James Jones as the general manager of the Phoenix Suns. Everyone that I've spoken to at this point, no one would have went after Ishbia if he let go of James Jones at the end of that season, because that's what every new owner, head coach, general manager does. They come in, they clean house, they want to hire their own guys. No one would have been like, oh, this guy's just tearing things up. Everyone does that. It felt like he wanted to hire Bartlestein, but was afraid of the pushback that he maybe get of firing James Jones. And so they just made them co-GMs. I understand that you're saying like assistant GM to CEO. Fine. Then why is he the CEO of the Suns? What is basketball operations and GMing having anything to do with MasterCard sales? So that's like, none of it makes sense.
Agreed. It doesn't make a lot of sense of how they've chosen to make people's titles and who works with who and who's in charge of who. None of that makes sense. But I do just like to clarify, because people, I think they're like, he's just an agent's son who knows, like how to do marketing really well, and then all of a sudden he's doing this, and it's like, well, he did, do the other job there. But yeah, it doesn't add up in any direction. Yeah. And it just speaks to, it's almost like part of me wonders reading stuff like this. I'm like, is this a spot where maybe we are giving Ishbia almost a little bit too much credit, and he's kind of being cheap with this? Like, he's not just spending the money, because it's like, I read that thing I just read from Gerald where it's like, Bartlestein will only be, sidelined and be more of a business guy if Jones isn't and a new guy's brought in, and then it's like, is there a limited number of positions that can be hired for? Like, there's no cap on this stuff. Just hire as many people until you feel like you got a good staff, and then leave it. Like, this whole if-then, all this crap, it's so weird right now.
I had like, obviously, we'll prep for this stuff, and I had a bunch of notes of things that I wanted to say. The more we go down this rabbit hole, the more confused I am. So I'm struggling with getting out like my actual specific opinion on this. Clearly, I don't want Josh Bartlestein making any decisions. You're absolutely right. He can stay in the position of CEO. You said this to me before, and I'm wrong. I just want him gone because I don't like the guy. I don't like the way he was brought in. I don't like the way that work has been done. I don't like that he works with James Jones. Like, that kind of stuff bothers me. And I'll tell you what, though, after all of this stuff that has percolated, and I've sung the praises of Matt Ishbia, and I've continued to defend him, this is one of the times where I'm like, I don't know how much, like last time when we did the Bob Myers show, I was like, dang, he might really be getting it. And now I'm thinking, oh my God, are we doomed for disaster again? Because you're not going to fire the GM after 1 year, I don't think. That usually doesn't happen. So I don't know, man. I don't think it's going cheap. I'm not going to accuse him of that until he actually does it, but it wouldn't shock me because he has written a lot of big checks, and at some point the bill comes
I don't
due
mean cheap like that's why they're not getting Myers or something. I mean cheap up to this point where it's like, you have to have the CEO wearing two hats, because I guess you don't want to just hire another guy in the front office who you also trust, or is it just damage control where nobody actually wants to admit how much of an influence Bartlestein has, so we kind of have to like talk around it and be vague? I really don't know what the answer is, but it just brings me back to, like I said, all these if-thens and half reports and everything else. Like, it kind of feels like all roads lead to someone like Myers right now, and it makes me really worried about what happens if they do strike out, right? Because, Jones will be gone if they hire a top dog. Bartlestein will reduce his impact and influence on the basketball side if they hire a guy like this. Jones is running the coaching search until they hire another top dog to be in charge of it. Ishbia, wants to execute an identity and a vision, and it almost seems like he's putting out feelers for somebody to tell him what that vision and identity are going to be. And they want that to be Bob Myers. But like, if you tell me a world where the Nuggets get eliminated and, next Monday's show, we're talking about Bob Myers, a report from Shams that says Bob Myers is expected to be the next Nuggets GM, and the Suns come up short in that, I mean, I'm going to be pretty panicked, I would say, of what do all of those ifs and ands and buts lead to then if it's not him? Because we haven't even heard another name outside of the other dude who used the Suns for leverage, which is the Milwaukee GM, who, the Suns might be interested in him. Freaking 15 minutes later, he has an extension. You know what I mean? So if that happens again, then I am going to be really worried because it's going to feel like they don't have any answers.
I don't know where they're going to go at this point, man. I don't know what to believe. I am probably knocked back down to 15% in the Bob Myers sweepstakes. I don't know, man. I don't know who they've talked to. None of the reporting makes any sense. And again, I don't think people are just adding fuel to the fire. But the Mark Stein sourcing is a bit damning, man. I go back to, why is he leading? Why are we even looking for a head coach? If we don't have a general manager.
Wasn't it supposed to be that they didn't do any of that until the guy was hired to run the front office? That was his specific news item last week, was that they weren't even going to look at coaches until that side was done. So why did that change?
Well, he said specifically, I know maybe not concrete in this, but he said it's not going to be in 2 weeks where it's going to say the Suns hire a new head coach. It's like, okay, it goes back to that news conference. Why are these guys up there? Do they have jobs? Because we don't understand. Yeah. So this has by far been the most confusing episode that we've done, because now I'm not sure what I believe and what I agree with. I don't know where to go, what avenue to go in, because none of it makes any sense. At this point, I'm like, is Jones going to stay? Why? That can't be true. He can't be headlining this. There's no way he's headlining a coaching search. I believe the Bartlestein stuff's going to go away, but like, I don't know, man. Maybe what if Ishbia is trying to carve a way to move Bartlestein to the GM position? Move James Jones out, put Bartlestein in, hire someone else to be the CEO. You could say he's qualified, right? Assistant GM of the Detroit Pistons. Like, I can make it a case for that with all the information that we've had, which just again leads to doesn't make any sense.
I think everything, it feels like it's kind of on the table right now. I do just like, part of why I'm still entertaining the Myers thing, or even some name we haven't heard of, and not fully on the side of like, well, Jones is just staying and whatever, is this feels like the type of confusing reporting that you get, and then like another shoe drops and you're like, oh, it was that. It was that all along. And we just like, no one fully knew the big picture, but kind of like how you heard when the Luka trade happened, where it's like Utah was the third team, and then they started to spread the word that they felt like the salaries had to be something. So then other teams guessed it was Luka, and then all of a sudden, oh, it was Luka getting traded. We never would have guessed, right? Like, it feels like it's something like that. My final word on this, it's amusing and interesting to me that, like with the Jimmy Butler thing and a lot of other stuff, I mean, this show's almost over. You can leave the light off if you want. It's like Ishbia, whoever, the Suns are leakaholics. And now it's like you can't get one straight fact from this front office as far as reporting is concerned. That's also just very odd to me. That with Butler, we knew every little bit of information all the way through the Jimmy Butler thing, and now it's like, who knows? No, anyone's guess what happens in Phoenix. Like, it's just very odd.
Remind me next time we have a press conference or whatever, or we get a chance to ask Ishbia a question, so I can say, hey, who's the one running the show? Who's the one giving us all the leaks? And if so, could you fire that person?
Yeah, I'll let you can definitely ask that question, and I'll film the response. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. We'll be back for you tomorrow with the latest news. Hopefully a little more clarity and facts would be nice. Enjoy your Monday. We'll talk to you then.